All right, we've hit the top of the hour, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. And this is your February 2021 webinar for Kentucky Monthly Climate Perspectives on Drought and Hydrologic Conditions. I'm Megan Shargorodsky. I'm the manager of the Kentucky Mesonet, and I'll be your moderator today. Leading the discussion today will be Stuart Foster, who is the state climatologist as well as the director of the Kentucky Climate Center and Kentucky Mesonet. And we also have Matt Dixon to discuss the agricultural impacts, and he's from the UK Ag Weather Center. And without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started, and I will pass it over to Stu.
All right, thank you, Megan. I appreciate that introduction. Got an interesting month behind us and one ahead of us, I think. We've got our credits here to everyone that helps with this webinar series, National Integrated Drought Information System and the Midwest Drought Early Warning System, and our many partners here around the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I see that I forgot to update the slide there for our next scheduled webinar, which is the first Thursday in March. So I think that should be March 4th again. So my apologies for that. You have a recording that will be available of this webinar for later viewing. And there's again our reference to the Kentucky Drought and Hydrologic Impact Reporter developed at the Kentucky Division of Water, Chip Zimmer, and hosted here at Western Kentucky University in our GIS Center. Okay, the outline, same that we've seen many times with a slight addition here. Once we get through recent conditions and impacts over the last month, we're going to talk about ag impacts, and Matt Dixon is going to give us a little more in-depth examination at not just what's happened over the last month, but a bit of a climate perspective on changes that are happening and impacting the agricultural sector. So I think you'll appreciate that here this month. And then we'll get into our outlooks as to what we might expect here in the weeks ahead and then out to the spring season that's ahead of us. So on the left, we've got a couple photos from Boone County. We've got some snow on the ground there, and representative of the last month where we've had a number of light snow events with pretty light accumulations in parts of the state, certainly not statewide. But for the most part, we really haven't had much snow. What snow we have has not accumulated and stayed on the ground very long. So for the most part, lots of the state has simply seen bare ground here this winter, and for a period fairly dry conditions, but that's changed a little bit recently. If we look at the 30-day precipitation totals observed from the Mesonet stations, laid over on the radar estimates from National Weather Service, you can see a swath across the state where we had the impacts of a heavy rain event that produced amounts of 2 to 3 inches in parts of the western Kentucky and lesser amounts elsewhere. But with that, totals for the last 30 days in some areas up to and around 5 inches, whereas other parts of the state in the southeast and then up along the Ohio River amounts between 2 and 3 inches, much more common. If you look beyond Kentucky to our north and south, you see lighter amounts of precipitation. So that storm track came right through our area and gave us a lot more precipitation than our neighbors to the north and south. A 60-day map, you see again the effect of that heavy event, and the 60-day totals in that area are up to 9 inches or a little bit over. And then across the state there to the eastern part in the yellow shading, again, you have areas with between 7 and 8 inches of precipitation, with generally lower amounts outside of those areas, again, in the southeastern part of the state, and then up along the Ohio River, where precipitation totals are in the neighborhood of 6 inches plus and minus. And then looking at the 90-day perspective, here we kind of lose that pattern of the heavy precipitation event that we had in late January. It doesn't show up as much here. We have amounts generally across the state between 8 inches and over 11 inches in some areas. Pretty fairly uniform across the state, and of course we would expect that as we get out to a longer and longer time period, things are going to kind of average out geographically, typically is the case anyway. So precipitation pretty well distributed across the state for that period. And if we look at that in the context of what's normal, we're looking at the 30, 60, 90-day percent of normal maps. And a key theme here is that we were getting dry. And in fact, the drought monitor had moved portions of Kentucky into the D0 or abnormally dry category. That lasted for 1 week before the heavier precipitation came through and changed the story a little bit. But if you look at the 90-day map and even the 60-day map, you see some areas there that are pretty widespread across the state where we are less than 90%, down around 75% of normal precipitation. And again, the heavy precipitation event has helped with that. But the thing to keep in mind here, I made a bullet note of it. If you kind of know the drainage basin of the Cumberland River that with headwaters in southeastern Kentucky and then flowing down into Tennessee through Nashville and then back up into western Kentucky, that area has remained persistently dry through the 30, 60, and 90-day periods. So if we're looking at hydrologic conditions and looking at drainage basins, that would be something to keep an eye on as a leading indicator, perhaps, if we see the development of dry conditions going forward. Temperature, we've got some new maps this week. This month, I sat in on the Midwestern Regional Climate Center's recent workshop and learned a little bit more about capabilities that had been in their climate system, but I hadn't tapped into yet. So we can kind of zoom in with our temperature maps a little bit. If you look at our high temperatures, they've generally been near to a little bit below normal over the last 30 days. The eastern part of the state a little bit cooler relative to normal than the west, whereas low temperatures have averaged roughly 2 to 3 degrees above normal pretty uniformly across the state. And again, that would be consistent with some cloudier conditions there, keeping our overnight lows a little bit warmer, and the lack of persistent snow cover on the ground. Soil moisture and shallow groundwater levels are generally about normal, kind of where we would expect them to be, and maybe a little bit on the wet side in terms of shallow groundwater. All in all, while we had been a little bit dry, it doesn't show up when we start looking at soil moisture. And we take a look now at some of the measured soil moisture at our Kentucky Mesonet stations. I picked stations, some of these were in last week, the Trigg County and Clinton County on the bottom. We added Crittenden County and Boone County across the top. And what I did this month was I looked at those precipitation maps and tried to find parts of the state, with the exception of Trigg County, tried to find parts of the state that were drier than normal. and where we might be concerned about seeing a hint of dryness. And as you look at those graphs, you really don't see it. So again, we're in the cool season of the year. There's really no evapotranspiration to speak of. And so while it's dry, soils are not drying out per se. So we're still at this point have good soil moisture. Soils have been replenished. And then again, we've added some of that recent rain. 7-day stream flows. We still have some areas that are running much above normal, reflecting that recent precipitation event. Otherwise, things are near normal, so we don't have any below normal flows on the 7-day average. 28-day average, a little bit different story there. You can see, in particular, there on the Tennessee border, you've got a few stations there that are below normal in terms of stream flows. That's that area that I pointed out in the Cumberland Basin that we want to keep an eye on here, that if things do dry out, that's probably where it's going to start to show up first. And in fact, there's already some indication right there. Otherwise, if we look across the state, things look pretty good. We're in normal to above normal stream flow conditions. Current flooding, there had been some minor flooding on the Green River. Now that is receding. We're back down to the near flood stage level. Otherwise, no real issues across the state in terms of flooding at this point. Now moving on to the drought monitor, we see the continuation of severe and extreme drought conditions in parts of the western U.S. We've seen this now for the last several months after we had a ramp up in the amount of coverage of drought across the U.S. But we're seeing some pockets of dryness in the east, some of that down in the Florida Peninsula and along the Gulf Coast, creeping up into Tennessee. And again, that D0 abnormally dry that's in Tennessee did creep up into Kentucky there for a little bit. But we want to keep an eye on this. The La Nina pattern would suggest that there's an enhanced likelihood of dry conditions to our south. And as we mentioned on past webinars, we see some historical cases where dry conditions to our south crept up into the Ohio Valley and were kind of a precursor of drought to develop in our region. But certainly, it's much too early to draw too much of a conclusion from that. We're just trying to pay attention, be aware of what's out there. And if we look at the 1-month change in status, this misses the short period of D0 in Kentucky because again, it was just for a week in between the 1-month period in terms of cutoff for the changes. But you can see again in Tennessee and to the south some yellow where those dry conditions are developing just over the last month. They were not there the month before. Otherwise, there's some good sign in the sense that there has been some improvement in drought conditions as we move a little farther west into Texas and parts of the plains, and then in some of the areas in the Midwest. So that's a good sign. Otherwise, no major changes, but you would not anticipate that this time of year. So moving on to storm impacts over the last month. Again, we really had two kinds of things going on. We had the heavy rains on January 25th, 26th. There were some embedded thunderstorms with that. There were some minor road and street flooding in some areas that were reported, and you can see some symbols there on the map for flood and flash flood. And then there were also some embedded thunderstorms within that system that produced some damaging winds, and there are some symbols there for wind damage. There were some trees knocked over, one on a house, but otherwise no major damage from any of that. And then there were some reports of hail, but no indication of size or any impact or damage from that. rather unusual time of year to be reporting hail in January. And then otherwise, we had some snow and a couple reports of freezing rain that I think are kind of covered up there on the map in northern Kentucky. But again, several reports of snow, but in each case, it was light snow that at most was about 3.5 inches, and most places less than that. And there were no major impacts reported in conjunction with that. So Megan, with that, I'm going to send it back, and we'll go up the road to Lexington and or wherever Matt might be today, and turn it over to him.
All right, sounds good. We're going to bring Matt Dixon on from the UK Ag Weather Center.
Thanks, guys. I'm back on campus today for teaching, but what I'm talking about today may not only relate to ag production, but other sectors also. Bottom line, our climate in Kentucky has been trending wetter and warmer over recent years, and I'm going to take a closer look at those elements today. So I actually went through this topic in early January at the UK Winter Wheat meeting, but thought this would be another good opportunity to discuss the changes we've been seeing. Like I told them, I hope this data may prompt some thoughts as to how this warmer and wetter climate could impact your management and production practices going into the future, whatever sector that may be. So on this first slide, I took a look at the top 10 wettest years across the Bluegrass State. This data goes back to 1895, and with 2020 data now official, we have added another year to the top 10 list. 2020 now sits at number 8, as a state average 57.87 inches last year, which is about 10 inches above normal. This was pushed in a large way by the state seeing 10 straight months of above normal precip to begin the year. We did have some below normal precip November and December, but all that rainfall early on in the year really won out. As you can see on the chart, wet conditions have been no stranger to Kentucky as of late. Over the past 10 years, we have now had 5 years that place in the top 10 wettest years on record. I highlighted all those in green. 2011 tops the list at 64.35 inches, but in recent past, you see 2019 in the top 10 also. So taking out the top 10, the state has now went 6 straight years with the annual state precip average running above normal. Bottom line, it has been wet around here. So next slide, please. So now taking a look at temperatures, these numbers have taken the same trend as precip, with 4 of the past 10 years placing the top 10 warmest years on record. Once again, in this case, they're shaded in orange. Everyone will remember 2012 when we had that last major drought in Kentucky, and multiple days surpassing the century mark in late June and early July that year. 2016, 17, and 2019 are not too far behind. In 2020, while it's not in this top 10 list, it sits at number 17 on record. So just like precip, temperatures have also ran above normal for 6 straight years in Kentucky. Just while I'm on the subject, keep in mind when I say the word normal, I'm looking at the average climate conditions over a period of 30 years. Right now, the normals are based on the 30-year period of 1981 through 2010. These are updated every decade, so our next set of normals will be based on the years 1991 to 2020. Looking back, I went and checked out when the last set of normals came back for that 81 through 2010 timeframe, and it looked like it was July of 2011. So we'll see if that's the case again this year. Next slide, please. So now to the next 5 slides. I produced some time series scattered plots with annual and seasonal temperature and precip data going back to 1981. In these plots, I'm placing the year where the annual temperature average on the x-axis meets the total annual precip on the y-axis. Looking at a real quick example, precip in 2020 averaged 58.87 inches across the state. In that same year, the average temp was 57.1 degrees. If you trace lines from the bottom and left side of the plot for the corresponding values, you see the XY coordinate for 2020 shows up in the upper right highlighted in red. Overall, I included all years going back to 1981, which takes into account all those years associated with the current 1981 through 2010 climate normals. I then took the scatter plot a step further and divided the plot into a matrix with 4 boxes separated by the 81 through 2010 temperature and precipitation averages for Kentucky, shown by those red and blue lines. Looking at the boxes, any years in the top right box would be years that saw above normal precip and temps. The top left has years that saw above normal precip and below normal temperatures. The bottom left is both below normal temperatures and precipitation, and the bottom right shows any years with below normal precip and above normal temps. So just to show the trend we've seen in recent years, I highlighted the past 5 years in red. And as you can see, each falls in the box labeled above normal precip and temperatures. Next slide, please. So a question may arise, how does this scatter plot look if it was based on the season and not the year as a whole? So to make it easier, I based the following 4 scatter plots on the meteorological seasons. I start out with the winter season of December through February. What do you see? The trend of above normal precip and temperatures that we saw on the annual scale carries over to the seasonal scale in winter. Our past winter of 2019 and 20 actually sits as one of our wettest and warmest winters on record. Overall, it sits just behind 16-17 as our warmest winter. So next slide, please. This trend translates into the spring months of March through May. While Kentucky seems to be running closer to average during the spring months, they are still predominantly all still located in the top right quadrant. In all 5 years, Kentucky saw above normal temperatures in spring, and other than 2019, above normal precip also. Next slide, please. So let's see, going on to the summer months of June through August, 4 of the 5 years placed in the upper right quadrant. 2017 did run a bit cooler during the summer months that year, but still wetter than normal overall. And then lastly, the next slide, the fall months keep up with the same trend for the most part. The only exception was the fall of 2016 when drought and wildfires were a problem across the state. So overall, you can see the annual trend of above normal precip and temperatures is translating over to the seasonal scale also for the most part. So moving on, I wanted to add some slides that relate a bit more to the ag sector. In recent years, you may have seen wheat coming out of winter dormancy a little earlier than normal, that green up period. This may have been the same case for some of those fruit crops across Kentucky also. I created these slides for the winter wheat meeting showing growing degree day accumulations over the first 5 months of the year and try to explain why wheat may be coming out of dormancy earlier. Ultimately, if you're not familiar with the term growing degree days, we are essentially relating crop growth and development to temperatures. The simplest way to calculate these growing degree days is to just take the max and min temperature for the day and find the average. Then you take that average and subtract a base temperature, which is the minimum temperature required for growth for a particular crop. This base temperature will, or for wheat, was 32 degrees. So all in all, I took those daily growing degree day values and accumulated them over the 5-month period. In this graph, I looked at growing degree day accumulations for Lexington. As you can imagine, when the line increases, we expect growth and development. When it levels off, we are in the midst of a cooler period. So outside of the fact that 2017 and 2020 saw some pretty significant accumulations early in the winter, it may be a little hard to take much info from this graph. So that takes us to our next graph, where all I did was change the color of the lines. 2011 through 2015 is now blue. 2016 through 2020 is now red. What is the main difference you see? Overall, the latter 5 years are showing more growing degree day accumulations and thus more growth and development prior to March each year. 2016 through 2020, in a way, basically had a head start compared to the previous 5 years. Saying all this, I did add 2021 data on here through February 2nd. And based on the data thus far, we are tracking more so with the blue lines in 2021. And I don't see that changing much based on the outlooks that Stu's going to talk about in a bit. So now I take you to the next graph, which displays data for Paducah. So once again, you see 2017 and the yellow line running out ahead of all the other years. Going on to the next graph and changing the colors again to blue and red, you see that same trend as Lexington. The one difference is you see 2021 is tracking a little more so with the last 5 years in red, meaning Western Kentucky has been running warmer than the bluegrass area. So overall, the warmer winters have progressed wheat and its development a little more rapidly and leads to more advanced growth stages earlier in the year. And this was definitely the case last year in 2020 when wheat was starting to head in early to mid-April. And in the end, the earlier development leads to more frost and freeze susceptibility earlier in the spring, which is what we saw last year. So with that, I wanted to show you guys this climate data. I'll probably include these growing degree day plots in future webinars to see how we are progressing compared to previous years in 2021. But other than that, as far as I've been hearing from other farmers and producers, there's not much way in the impacts for agriculture right now. As Stu was saying, I think a lot of these cattle producers like the dry conditions we saw in earlier in January, those 2 or 3 weeks, and we did have that heavy rainfall event late in January. Did produce some more of that muddy conditions we don't like to see, but with the outlooks trending toward a colder outlook, that does present some good news moving forward. So with that, I'll send it back to you, Megan.
Thank you so much, Matt. And I greatly apologize for the parakeet that was chirping in the first half of yours before I realized.
Oh,
I
you're
was
fine.
muted.
You're fine.
You did a great job. I didn't even notice. So we are going to move over to Stu Foster, and he's going to talk about the outlooks.
All right. Thanks, Megan, and thanks, Matt. I really appreciated that presentation and tying climate into agriculture in terms of application. Really important. And this webinar series provides a great opportunity to kind of delve into special topics a little bit more from every now and then. So really welcome that presentation. So now kind of looking ahead with that climate context, our 7-day precipitation forecast for Kentucky shows about what we would anticipate for this time of year, some chance of about ½ an inch plus or minus of precipitation across the state. So that's, looks colorful, looks like it's a wet area, but ½ an inch over a 7-day period is not that much. So it would be a below normal total all in all. And see a good bit of dryness to our west here, and no major moisture across the country at this time, with the cold air that's kind of settled in. 6 to 10 day outlooks talk about cold air. To say that there is an enhanced likelihood of below normal temperatures is probably an understatement. You've got some very, very dark blue and purple tones there that indicate upwards of 70, 80, 90% likelihood of below normal temperatures. And that's extending down across the eastern U.S. into the southeast. So it's been cold the last few days. We've got a couple days here ahead of us that are pretty seasonable, but the cold air is going to be returning here in this next 6 to 10 days. Associated with that, below normal forecast for precipitation. And again, we've got cold, dry air coming in, setting in over our area. And it suggests that the storm track is going to be pushed farther south. And really, we're not going to get the advantage of Gulf moisture coming up into the Ohio Valley, as long as this cold air is in place. And if we look out to 8 to 14 day that pattern persists. It's been a while since we've had a really cold winter. Again, the first part of it didn't start out that way, but February, the first half of February at least, we're going to have to get used to this. And again, likely to be below normal precipitation-wise. It really just depends on how strong that flow of cold air is and how persistent it is. As long as it comes in, pushes to our south and kind of sits there, we're not going to, again, get the benefit of storm track coming up through our area. But depending on how it would position, there are scenarios where it could lead to a good bit of precipitation, but that doesn't appear to be in the cards for us going forward. So the outlook for the month of February was updated at the end of January and reflects that shift to a cold bias. Have introduced a good bit more blue there on the left-hand side that comes down and gets into Kentucky. Has us still with an enhanced likelihood of above normal precipitation. We'll see how that plays out. Again, this update was made on the 31st. If this cold air settles in, persists, if that pattern becomes stronger than was initially anticipated, then I think we're less likely to see the above normal precipitation. But that's a little bit too early to tell. But this outlook still kind of hangs on to a little bit of a La Nina type of pattern there in terms of above normal precipitation for our area. That La Nina pattern that we've been talking about for the last few months persists. It was anticipated to persist through the winter, and now we have a 95% chance of it persisting through January, February, and March. Again, that's not surprising. You can see in the top right the time series of the INSO index. And you can see the blue bars coming down here for the most recent period. It's been, again, we're just getting, halfway through the winter, so we'll see how long that persists. It's evident that we, have the potential to stay in a La Nina circulation for an extended period. But the forecast suggests, and typically is the case, that once we get into the summer months, that weakens and would more likely to go back to a neutral situation. Matt was talking about the warmer temperatures all in all, but indicated that this winter things may we may not see a repeat of some of those warmer winter conditions in spring. So La Nina would be consistent with that notion that we might not be as warm this year. Frequently, when we look at a global scale, in the aftermath of an El Nino, which is associated with warmer than normal sea surface temperatures in the equatorial Pacific, that often leads to globally warmer than normal temperatures. So La Nina would be the opposite situation from that. So we'll keep an eye on that La Nina advisory and those conditions going forward. Again, this is what La Nina typically means for us. We look at the January, February, March period. It has the enhanced likelihood of us being wetter than normal, but by no means is it a guarantee. There's a wide range of conditions in that second box in the upper row from the left. You can see the blue bar that is the median. Half of the years were wetter than that, half drier. So far this winter, we are probably a little bit below that blue bar. So we have not had any extreme wet conditions here in the state. And temperature-wise, again, not really a strong signal, but you can see that there have been several years where we have the white bars on the blue part of that graph that are well below the median line. So it's certainly not uncalled called for to have a situation where we have cold conditions during a La Nina. And then if we take a look at the seasonal outlook, again, based largely on that La Nina circulation pattern, we still see the same kind of thing we've been looking at the last couple months. Enhanced likelihood of warmer than normal temperatures, enhanced likelihood of above normal precipitation. We really have not seen that so far, and we don't expect it over the next couple weeks, but it's still in the longer term outlook. So we'll see how that plays out. Monthly stream flow outlook, normal to above normal stream flows. And again, consistent with the outlook that we just saw and the recent conditions that we've experienced here in the state. And here again is that newer product from the Ohio River Forecast Center that highlights some near flooding, okay, in terms of the yellow circle and box. There, otherwise everything kind of in the normal category. And I'll be honest, I think I need to get in touch with Jim Knoll up at the Ohio River Forecast Center and see if we can get a little bit more detail on, you know, the interpretation of this new graphic and such. So I haven't seen that. I'll have to try to get that for everybody going forward here. And the wildfire or wildland fire potential outlook, below normal going forward. So again, even though we had some dry conditions before, recent rains and cold conditions and such, we've got a depressed likelihood of wildland fire. And summarizing all of that, we had a lot here today. Widespread rain in late January helped ease developing dryness across much of the state. Soil moisture, shallow groundwater, stream flows, all, you know, roughly around normal, not too far off from that halfway through the winter. So that's good for us all in all. Below normal temperatures likely to persist through the near term, so we need to get used to that. And then La Nina conditions expected to persist through the winter. Thus far, we have not had unusually wet conditions. That is common with La Nina. But given the increasing extent of drought on a national scale, dry conditions to our south, we will continue to pay close attention to it and see how it plays out here the rest of the winter months. So with that, Meg and I will send it back to you, and we'll have a chance for any questions or comments.
All right. If anyone has any questions or comments they would like to make about the presentation, feel free to either unmute yourself or type it in the chat box. And for those of you who are watching on the YouTube live, go ahead and type it into the chat box there. And I'll give just a minute to give people a chance to respond. All right, looks like we have one comment from Dr. Eric Rappin. Do we think harvesting of winter wheat may impact spring weather?
I don't know if Matt's still on, wants to take a stab at that. Otherwise, I'll be happy to. I don't anticipate an impact from that. So, you know, that harvesting is not going to happen until later, much later here in the spring season, once we get into what I think June, probably May or June, that time period. So I don't anticipate that being an issue. But Matt, if you're on there and want to add any comments.
Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting myself here, but yeah, I would agree with you. Let me open up the question one more time. Do you think harvesting of winter wheat may impact spring weather? Yeah, I would tend to agree with Stu on this one. So.
Yeah, and based on Eric's comments, then whatever impact would be, consistent with, year to year affects our weather. So it probably it should be baked into our climate normals, whatever impact that would be, since that harvest is pretty predictable from year to year. Although I guess the acreage of winter wheat does change over time. I don't know how it's trending per se.
Eric, there have actually been some really cool studies on winter wheat harvest and the impact on the weather out of the University of Oklahoma from about 10 to 15 years ago. So I can't talk much on the points now, but there's definitely been a lot of research on that. All right, do we have any other questions? All right, if there is nothing else, we will go ahead and wrap everything up. As Dr. Foster mentioned earlier, the next regularly scheduled webinar is March 4th, 2021, first Thursday of the month at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central. And the contacts for feedback are listed here as always, as well as the Kentucky Drought Hydrologic Impact Reporter and the story map links. When all of those will go out following this webinar when I send out the follow-up email. So if there are no further questions, we will go ahead and end this. So hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you in March.